Okay. We're allowing the attendees to come in. Okay, I'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Diversity MBA Media's cultural webinar series, Being Black in America. My name is Pam McElvain. I'm the CEO of Diversity MBA and Diversity Learning Solutions. We're excited to present the first in the series during Black History Month, a real conversation from experts that can fill any ignorance out there or unawareness out there with knowledge. We know knowledge is power. And here's an opportunity for you to hear from some very specific leaders that actually represent millions of others that are like us. We are in reality 12.9% of the US population. So we do have a representation that we want to speak to. And then not only that, just a little bit of housekeeping. Our chat is open for any resources you want to share, any questions for the panelists, and know that this is going to be a recorded platform that will be available on all of the various mediums. So we encourage you to go back and share and re-listen and take that's important to you. So as we get started, and before I go into introducing the panel, I want to take a couple minutes to really, from my lens as a data scientist in producing the Inclusive Leadership Index for the past 19 years, to share with you what we've seen in terms of the workplace and the communities around the Black experience. And let me also add, the purpose of us having these conversations was really for us to be able to show solidarity. Where I am surrounded with many experts and thought leaders, I wanted to create an opportunity for others to share their experiences and their expertise so you have on your pulse an increase and enhanced resource network that you could go back to. Among our group, I'm not the only author, but we have other authors with us. We have published executives and leaders with us. We have folks to clarify what's happening in the talent pipeline. We have people here to help you understand what truly chief diversity officers are doing. We have folks to tell you the power of being a part of a professional network, as well as folks to tell you what it means to your consumer power, what social consciousness is. And then someone that really can put their pulse on healthcare, what's really happening and what you need to know and don't know. Personalize this as much as you need to, as well as, make it as personal, or not personal, organic as it should be. So let me just a couple of data sets that we pulled and what we'll share with you as a resource later. And perhaps, we'll ask Dr. Charles to do the same thing. We'll share with you some insights that you can take and share with others. So first, when we think about, what does, being Black in America mean when it comes to numbers? When we talk about those of us that are actually here, the population and the growing of the population, while we're still under 13%, we've actually stabilized in that number. Now, know that the US Census, plus or minus 5%, has an ability to be wrong in terms of the size. So you mean we could be more than 13% because there are those that might not are being able to be counted that we don't have in our numbers. We also don't have the level of immigrants that are part of our numbers than what we used to have. But the reality is, look, America is browning and we're 13% of it. 57% of America are white Americans. And what's going to happen in the next US Census that you should know, they are going to actually capture Middle Easterns. So that means the white Americans number is going to drop even further. And then we have other uplifting of other organizations. And so you also have heard, and we have experts in education that's here that can talk about that, but we still have found that African-American women are still one of the fastest growing groups that's matriculating from undergraduate programs and from associate degree programs, believe that or not. That is still, what's happening. So we want to still have a continued conversation around how we can have this opportunity for those of us that don't have resources to get, to get funding and where we can go for school. I will tell you that corporations, and this is a little bit post-Trump era, but they're not leaving this. The corporations still are very interested in vocational skills. They're still very interested in apprenticeships where it makes sense for them. So that's still an opportunity for African Americans and the next generation to come. We do know, in looking at the younger generation, they are very much socially conscious, the groups that's graduating from the top tier universities. Right now, the job market and outlook, because they're not competing based on ethnicity, they're competing based on their actual aptitude and where they come from. They're not as challenged in terms of getting positions as maybe the larger group of professionals and what's happening. So you'll hear about some of that today. But some of the workplace statistics that I just want to share with you when you talk about where are African Americans or Black people in the corporate and larger employer ladder, the reality is it hasn't moved and it hasn't shifted. And, it's still where it is. We are, of the 75% of white Americans, 36.9% are white women that are in management and senior leadership roles. 25% are people of color. Of that 25%, 9% are African Americans. Of that 9%, 4% are African American women. And this is across industries. This is across the marketplace. So when you look at the opportunities in terms of representation, if you will, or composition, if we want to use a different language other than diversity, the reality is we have a long way to go in terms of leveling the playing field. So part of that conversation is, what else can we do? What else must we do in terms of to ensure that not just our generation, but the next generation has the opportunity to continue to excel. And then finally, when you look at workplace inclusion, and we have that expert here to talk about that too, the organizations haven't left that. Even though we may have the reality is we do have an external impact in an environment that CEOs don't want to be target when it comes to their brand reputation. So, so they're not speaking out as much in terms of what they're doing. But a lot of organizations are continuing to develop their talent. So what's changed? You're going to hear a lot more about that from our diversity leaders. But cohorts, African-American cohorts, Hispanic cohorts, these cohorts still exist, but maybe the application process is opened and widened more so others can participate. But companies are still focused on ensuring that they provide the growth for their talent, as well as the opportunities, how they leverage employee resource groups and affinity groups. That still remains to be seen. Some companies are leaning in, others, not so much. But what they're not doing is dismantling their internal culture. They're trying to figure out how they navigate through that by mitigating risk and not having lawsuits. So we'll hear about a lot of what's happening, but also know that we want to talk about and think future forward. What is there for us? I say this too shall pass. Affirmative action was here and then it went away, but systemic processes that existed to retain affirmative action stayed in place. And they're going to struggle, and it's going to be hard to get rid of EEOC, but organizations aren't going to not stop tracking demographics and numbers and the meaningful of gender and identity. They're not going to do that. And you'll hear it from some of the organizations in terms of what happens with that. DEI, the acronyms have been so weaponized that that might go away. And Black Americans, we're just a sliver in the DEI equation. However, DEI is being aligned to Blackness and brownness, and we know how it's being, the weaponization of it is trying to do other things that we can't allow ourselves to be caught up in. So let's talk about the collective power, the collaborative effort, the intention of taking our social and consumer value to the marketplace and allow us to be heard at the political table. So there I am, Pam McIlvaine, your host of the Inclusive Voice and of this webinar, The Black Experience in America, what it means to be Black. I say, I'm just gonna step back before I go around and introduce you guys. I listened to the Sly Stone documentary, and what he said that stood with me, resonates with me, he says, stand. Ordinary people stand. stand tall in what you believe in. So with that, I'm going to stop and I'm going to introduce this illustrious panel. And please, please feel free to ask as many questions as honest as you want and respect folks in the chat in terms of how you ask your questions. So we're going to start off with the beautiful ladies, being a little chivalrous here. And we'll start off with Angela Roseborough, who is the Chief Diversity Officer, Chief Diversity, Inclusion, Equity, Culture Officer of Toast Tab. So Angela, nice to have you join us. Tell us a little bit about, your background. Oh, Angela, you mute.
Sorry about that. I was sneezing. So thanks for having me. I will start off by saying I have been doing this work probably for the last 30 years. I started off in human resources, and when they first asked me to be a diversity program manager, I said absolutely not. I didn't want to be the Black woman saying hire more Black people and women. And so I really felt like my change and my impact would have been in the overall HR space. What I learned in that first I fell in love with this, two things happened. One, I started to connect to the business. I was in a professional services firm where they really had to demonstrate that they were doing supplier diversity or we wouldn't get the contract. And so that's when I really understood that you have to anchor this in business. When I did it in the banking industry, we were looking at how do we increase our revenue. And so we focused on women. We knew they were the up and coming demographic, and we increased our deposits by like 40% on the campaign that we did. So it's always been for me about how do we connect people to business? And I've done it at companies like Whirlpool, Jones Lang LaSalle. I then went over to tech, which I thought would be an easier, like I was going to embed DEI and I was going to write a book about it, and then I would go off into the sunset. And tech has been probably challenging in so many ways because you're dealing with founders versus people who have been kind of gone up through, and they're brilliant innovators, still learning how to be CEOs. And so it's been really an interesting journey. Personally, I am a South Side girl, born and raised. I am the youngest of Chicago. I think when I say South Side, everybody knows that's Chicago. So Chicago, born and raised. I'm the youngest of three. My brother was incarcerated from the ages of 12 to probably 35. My sister got pregnant at 17, and my mother's saving grace for me was that she was going to send me to Catholic school. So I thinking that would be the thing that got me to college. I got kicked out. And I remember there was one principal who saw something in me. And when you grow up on the South Side and you're just trying to, you think about what you don't want your life to be. You don't really dream about where your life should be. And she told me I was smart. That was the first time someone ever told me in my whole life I was smart. So I went from probably 50 ranked to probably 2 in the course of a year, just because one person saw a light in me. I went to take the ACT. I have a point to this story. Again, I'm on the South Side of Chicago, and I never forget this. There was this analogy. If you take your ACT, there's these reading passages, and they're like so long. And they were doing an analogy between two Shakespearean plays, and you should never read Shakespeare on a time test for the very first time. I didn't even know who Shakespeare was. They didn't teach that in my school. They just did it. We probably saw a video of Romeo and Juliet. That was probably the extent. And I realized in that moment, as I'm watching the other kids who were acing through this, that someone was going to make a prediction about who I was based on something I had no access or opportunity to learn. I went back, I got a low score, and a teacher said, I'm going to give you Shakespeare books. We didn't have them there. And she taught me Shakespeare, and I went back and aced the class. But when you think about equity and talk about leveling the playing field, to make a judgment of my capability based on something I didn't even have an experience with, there was an injustice there. There was something wrong with that. And so when we talk about being Black in America and what that means based on where you grow up, that was like my first experience with, I didn't have the same opportunities as the other kids that were in Evanston, that were probably in Hyde Park, that were probably in Wheeling, but I was going to be judged the same way.
Well, that's good. I like that. So now I'm shifting how I'm doing my introduction. So I'm going over to Tyrone Wise, who's the Associate Director of the Boost Program from the Haas School of Berkeley. The Haas School of Business of UC, University of California at Berkeley.
Yes, thank you, Pam, and thank you everyone for being here. Again, Tyrone Wise, Assistant Director for Boost at Berkeley Haas out of UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business. I am a Navy veteran. I served 8 years in the United States Navy after high school. Went in at 17. My parents had to sign for me. And did 8 years, got out, went to college, went to University of Pacific in Stockton, California, where I got my bachelor's in psychology and master's in education administration. I've been working in higher ed for about 14 years. And it's been a great opportunity just to be in the spaces and be at the sit at the table where change can be created. And also be a space where people who don't look like me are can be a voice for students who don't look like them. And so that's a really great opportunity that I have, and a lot of kind of what Angela was talking about. I resonate with that 100% of just access and the importance of access and working in higher ed. You see how important access is because you can see the change that a student makes with just having access. And that's, I think, the most important thing about being Black in America is just showing that we're no different than anybody else, and all we need is a seat at the table and the same instructions and the same opportunity that everybody else has. And we've seen by the numbers and just from personal testimonies of people who have that, how we excel. And I mean, even when we don't, I always say make the joke. We make chitlins taste good. So we can make something that even that isn't good to be good. And I'm not a fan of chitlins by any stretch, but people do eat it. I'm not one of them. But I think that just shows how we can make anything good, just with access and ingenuity. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about being Black in America.
And Tyrone, you had a stint in the military. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was 8 years United States Navy. I was actually in during the for 9/11. We were the first night carrier for 9/11 when that happened. And so that was really interesting being a part of that, and actually being under 21 when that happened, and then being post-war, pre-war and post-war of Iraq war. We've been in war forever, but pre and post Iraq war, I think has been a real experience for me, of how dynamics of the military has changed and what that even looks like now in real time. So I think that's something that's also very interesting to talk about and to see as a veteran in the United States Navy, and having fellow comrades that are in other branches that have pretty much can attest to that same experience of pre and post and what that looks like in the military.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So Maisha, I'm gonna have you jump in here. Maisha Robertson, who is the president of what she does in her spare time, president of the San Francisco National Black MBA chapter, and she'll share a little bit about what she does during the day and this incredible serving giving she has.
Thank you. So it's my pleasure to be here. I'm very excited about this. I get to be on the panel with my friend Jamal, who is like somebody I've always admired. So I'm excited about this with Pam, who is just an amazing individual who I absolutely love, and Tyrone. So I'm so excited. And then my new friends, Angela and Charles. So it's a pleasure to meet both of you. I guess my background is I'm a director of operations for Collective Impact Organization, Backbone, Oakland Thrives. And so we are a collective impact. It's like JPA that does work within Oakland to make sure that children, families, and communities of Oakland are the healthiest in the nation. So different initiatives around that, working with the city, the county, the school district, and other nonprofits and philanthropy organizations to make sure that happens within Oakland. And then, as Pam said, I am the president of the National Black MBA Association, San Francisco Bay Area chapter. I'm just walked into my 5th year, so 5 years strong. And so for me, my passion in all of this leadership and community, it was pretty much shaped by my journey of, being overlooked, always overqualified and underutilized in the workspaces. And all these places weren't built for people like us. And so for me, I was always the overeducated Black girl in the room. I worked for state government when I got out of college, and I love things being streamlined and going fast, and they want to go slow. So we didn't match. But for me, I knew like there has to be something better. And for all the people that I seen in those spaces, I always wanted more for them. And so I was always an advocate of people going back to school or going to professional development. So I just found that that's my passion. So I earned my BA at the wonderful Clark Atlanta University. I have an MBA and an MPA as well. And so despite the expertise that I have, I've always been told, wait your turn, or I have to prove myself over and over and over. As a Black woman, we understand that that's all we ever have to do is we say something, it's repeated, and then somebody else says it, and it's accepted. So, for me, being the president of this organization, I kind of use the model that Clark Atlanta taught us, find a way or make one. I help other people, students, professionals, and entrepreneurs figure out like where they want to be and how they want to be seen and valued. And so for me, the mission of National Black MBA, it aligns with everything that I am, who I am, and what I love to do. So National Black MBA, we're not a DEI initiative. We were here before DEI started. We are an organization developing Black talent, expanding leadership pipelines, and creating economic opportunities for all Black professionals, students, and entrepreneurs. So for me, like all of this work is more than like professional advancement. We all different chapter presidents who are on this call as well. But what we all do is we try to break the cycles of exclusion, trying to make sure that all the Black professionals and students who are going into the workforce are entrepreneurs who are out there, not just doing side hustles, but having their full-time job being their entrepreneurship, their business, that the ambition that they have, the education that they have is not overlooked. It's actually seen and valued. And the one thing that I love about what we do is like, as Black people, we are very resilient. And since, they don't always give us a seat at the table, we do build our own and we bring our own chair. And so I'm excited for the discussion. Again, there's amazing people on this panel. So I'm just looking forward to sharing my insights.
Thank you so much. Love that energy, Maisha, that you always bring. So author, executive William Jamal Miller, share with us who's the Chief Administrative Officer of Dignity Health and Common Spirit, a little bit about your background and who you are.
Yes, hello, everyone. Glad to be on the call and really grateful, Pam, for you considering me to be a part of this great dynamic cohort today. I am William Jamal Miller, Bill and Yvonne Miller's youngest son. I'm a native of Sacramento, California, born in '76. And my dad is from Mobile. My mom is from Mobile, Alabama. And my dad is from Port Huron, Michigan. And my parents have been married for 55 years. And I'm just very grateful for what they've poured into my life to make me who I am today. As Pam mentioned, as the Chief Administrative Officer for Mercy Medical Group, I'm a part of the physician enterprise of Common Spirit Health, which is headquartered out of Chicago. Prior to that, I led our national health equity strategies for Common Spirit Health. And I've had the distinct opportunity to work under Governor Jerry Brown in California to be California's first ever health equity officer, leading California's Office of Health Equity for about 5 years. And just really grateful for the experience that afforded me. When I think about what it means to be Black in America, just at a high level as a part of this preamble and introduction, I can't help but to think about the journey that those of us, the African diaspora, particularly our ancestors, have trailblazed for us all to be here to have conversations like this. I reflect back on the fact that in the 1600s, we started out as being called Africans because we were, and Negro. And when you get into the late 1800s, we make this categorical shift into being colored. And, mid 1900s, we kind of pivot to the continued use of being Negro and Afro-American. And then the 60s and 70s, we think about various social, political, and cultural movements. We are Black, and very much so when we think about civil rights and the Black Power movement. And then the 80s and 90s, when I'm in elementary school and high school and on my way to college, African American, becomes normalized. And as we're now in the 21st century, to some extent, when we think about Black and African American and those of us of the African diaspora, what it reminds me of is just how resilient we are, like Maisha mentioned, as we have been able to withstand terror, trauma, and oppression. But yet, still we have risen and have had the opportunities to us that our ancestors have afforded to us. So I'm grateful to be living examples of what that resiliency looks like. And also the other word about being Black in America for obvious reasons, whether it's chitlins, sweet potato pie, or technology, the innovation of those of us of the African diaspora. And that's something that we have offered the world over, goes grossly underappreciated. Attribution, as far as our innovation is concerned, has been a huge issue because there's so much that we've innovated around that we've not gotten credit for. But I take great pride in just being resilient, having an innovative spirit. And I think, with that royalty in our DNA, as Kendrick would say, it inspires us to just keep moving forward, and taking great pride in our swag, our vibe, our culture, our influence. And, conversations like this inspire me, and I'm just glad to be with you all today.
Thank you for that history. I knew you were going to bring it, so thank you for that, Jamal. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Charles Walker, affectionately known as Champ, who is actually, I don't want to call him a serial entrepreneur, but definitely an innovative one. He's currently the CEO of the Friends of the Movement that you'll all hear more about in the next couple of weeks. But right now, I think he brings a very powerful connection to where we are today and to share his experience as being Black in America. Charles, give us a little bit about your background.
Wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. Charles Walker, most people call me Champ. Pam just discovered that the other day. She said, what should I call you? And I said, it doesn't make a difference, right? I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, the home of James Brown. Say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. And the Augusta National, which hosts the Masters Tournament, the most prestigious golf tournament in the world. I say that because just like being Black in America, we live in a dichotomy whereby a paradox wherein it is struggle that once you've made it, what we've seen in this country is that Black prosperity is a threat to most. We've seen violence, bombing. We've seen revolts because of Black excellence. But at the same time, we are resilient, and we have served to be the backbone, the conscience of this nation. And I think because of our struggles, we have a certain empathy and a love, not just for ourselves, but for people in general. So I think we occupy a blessed position, being that we've overcome so much. And in my upbringing, my father came from a very, very poor family that's detailed in his book called From Peanuts to Power. He eventually became Senate Majority Leader and paid a price later on, did 8 years in prison, because he managed to, he headed up a $16 billion budget as chairman of Health and Human Resources Appropriations Committee. So I grew up with a father who worked, went to college, eventually was in the riots back in the early 70s, and became the first human relations commissioner in his region to fight against corporations and fight for civil rights in our area, and learned a lot. He discovered what we call the dot methodology, where they was putting a dot on applications when they were discriminating. And he exposed so many companies in our area from discrimination. He pretty much had to become a lawyer because he was tested at every level. And they tried to run him away. Well, they abolished his position because he was doing his job so well. It forced him into politics. When he got in politics, he became pretty powerful. The newspaper came after him, so we had to start our own newspaper. Started the newspaper and had a very successful business. By the time he was 24, he opened up well, at 22, opened up a smaller tax office with a one bay car wash. And that one bay car wash had my name on it. It had Champs. So Pam just asked me to, what made you get in business? I said, all I've ever known is business. That's all I grew up around. So the sky has been the limit for me. And seeing my father go from one struggle to the next and on television in the state of Georgia, becoming the first Black Senate Majority Leader in the country, in the South, that was a struggle that we grew up with. And what I've learned from that, there's two critical things. We suffer from the illusion of inclusion, and that if we want to make a difference, we must follow the money. And in the room, in the deal, we do a lot of talking, but we must be in the room because that's where the deals are cut. And so I had a child at 18 in college, but it woke me up quick. I was going down the wrong path. So I stopped playing basketball, so I'm focused on my work. Started an organization called Young Entrepreneurs and Associates, which was a referral service, which is 25 years ahead of Angie's List, where you made one phone call to get in touch with over 150 different products and services in the Black community. I paired Black college students as interns. They made referrals. We tracked the referrals. We paid them. But we ran into some issues, and that was tracking the payments. So for 35 years, we've been trying to figure out, working with civil rights organizations around the country where I was blessed to serve on the economic development committees, et cetera, work with many trade organizations, credit debit card companies, rewards companies, to try to build an infrastructure whereby we can track Black spending. And today, some 35 plus years later, we have developed FODM Global, which is Friends of the Movement Global, a social data analytics company that empowers consumers by giving them the ability to search for companies that align with their values, spend their money with impact every time they shop, and we report it on a NASDAQ-like ticker in real time. And so we've studied boycotts, boycotts. I've conducted boycotts in the past. Some have been successful, some majorly successful where I'm from. And my father and mother never played the radio. And so we're very results oriented, period. We didn't have time because my father was always on the run, had to do it the right way. And our businesses are always attacked. So couldn't play. So what we've put together is a way that, especially in this season and time in America, we must vote with our wallets and vote at the cash register. We advocate dual voting, right? In times past, what we've seen in this country is that blood, sweat, and tears, we always say, is why we receive civil rights. But the fact of the matter is, it wasn't the pictures of the dogs, going after Black people and our allies, or being hosed down or beaten with a bat. It was economic sanctions. They won't stop until we stop spending with them. And so we have a track record. We have a very vivid history of what it takes to bring about change. Now, unfortunately, we've become a race of consumers rather than producers. But in this particular season, we have a grand opportunity to turn that consumerism into conscious spending. We've developed a technology called the Voter Wallet, again, that allows you to instantly identify Black and allied businesses, use your debit credit card, spend, track it. We see our community aggregate total, how much we're spending in real time. It becomes a permanent boycott. Well, actually, I'm sorry, a permanent boycott, which is being proactive. So we're making conscious spending a lifestyle. We're taking a boycott and making it permanent, period. Because if we do not speak with our dollars, they will not hear us. So I've been advocating for the last 2.5 years, working with civil rights organizations under what we call the Our Money United campaign. They've endorsed us, and our goal is to change the era of civil rights into silver, SILVER rights, using a data-driven approach. We call it data-driven friendship. If you're not a friend, we're not going to spend with you, period, bar none. So I'm here today, blessed to have the privilege to be able to share with you all what we're doing, and hopefully we can contribute and organize our spending and change lives.
Thank you so much for your, powerful introduction of all of you as we get into, this conversation. And this is intended for you guys, so you know this, to be a table talk. You might have to unmute yourself because you might want to jump in on the yes and when you hear something being said. We wanted to go there. But, what you heard, what everyone heard from here is really the trifecta. Can you imagine if we could collectively, collaboratively, and move our social economics to where we're bringing the community, the powerhouse of the civil rights leaders together, and then being able to help activate and ensure that the workplace, and those of us in the workforce where they're challenged and think they have barriers, could align with community and those social values and, and at the grassroots level, and be able to bridge those connections and then move that social consciousness into deciding where you want to spend that aligns with your core values. That not a one-day boycott, but a boycott that drives what they need to do to respect you. Because I'm just going to say this, and no disrespect to any other group, but while the Hispanic population happens to be the fastest growing in America, and 1 in 5 by 2050 expected to be in the workforce, and there's all these projections of what this group will do and will bring, the Black Americans have demonstrated the consumer value. We've demonstrated the spending value. It's not projected of what we will do. We have been the largest group that have consistently and disproportionately higher than any other group, whether good or bad, but has spent and contributed to this economy. So we have to do that, and that has to mean something. So just wanted to share all that energy I was hearing. But you guys, I got a text, and okay, so we're gonna have to get the elephant out of the room. Y'all just gonna have to go there, just be respectful in how you go. So here's the elephant in the room, and I just want to know your, just briefly your perspective, and maybe share how you move past forward. Okay, the weaponization, the dysfunction, the dismantling of DEI and its impact on the Black experience and Black people. What does that mean to you, and what do I need to do to move past it? Okay, who wants to go first? Really, y'all gonna make me do that? Okay. All right, Angela. I was trying to be nice.
No, Charles was off mute, so I just knew that Charles was going to go first. So
There'll be these yes ands coming in, but let's go and get the elephant out of the room.
Yeah.
I think people, want it's because it's happening right now, and it's real right now.
I have lots
Go
of
ahead.
thoughts. I have lots of thoughts. But I'm gonna start with this from a corporate perspective, because that's kind of where I live right now. I think a couple of things. One, 15 years ago, we didn't talk about this stuff like bring your whole self to work, all this into corporate America. And so we didn't talk about race, religion, all those things. We're now in an era where I think employees are looking for companies to protect them from their governments because of all the legislations that is going on. I think it's going to be, I'm looking at this list right now. There are more companies who are standing firm with DEI than not. I think the media is really demonstrating the folks who are not, and some of them are just we're retooling. The issue for me is that we all want, like, if you think about what the folks who are trying to dismantle this is, it's about merit. That's what we all wanted. Like, so at the end of the day, the irony of this is no one wants to be hired because we are just as qualified. We are just as, educated. And this whole notion of that this is about an advantage is just a myth. DI is not about creating advantage for some. It's about removing barriers so that everybody can have an opportunity to do their best. And we have to reframe it. And when I talked to my company about this, when I was trying to think about what would our strategy be moving forward, it was going to be about business, I went back to, I'm in a restaurant industry where it's one of the most diverse businesses. You got to know your customer. You got to know, someone asked me, do I have to be Black to sell to a Black person? No, but you better understand that culture. You better understand what chitlins are. You better understand how I sell to you. And, if I think about who I am going to buy from, is somebody who knows me. And so I think the irony of what's happening in the politicization of this, first of all, I think it's a ruse for something else. But it's going to force companies who really believe in their business case. And Charles, you said something that was very particular. So I'm seeing where Target is losing money because we are not buying there. So it's going to have to be this economic sanction, and we're going to have to use that to be able to demonstrate. I would hate to be in a room as a Black woman to think I got into this room because I'm a Black woman. I'd rather you understand that I have come, I'm educated, probably have to be more educated. One of the things that we're brought up in is that, like, we got to be better. I can't slip. I don't get the forgiveness network. I don't get a chance to make a mistake. And I used to think for a long time that made me a better leader, but sometimes it's just exhausting. And so, but we still persist, and we talk about resilience. And so I think the companies who really get this, or who are trying to understand their business, will continue to move forward. And we decided not to change the name because, I think about, this is my Shakespearean now, and now I know everything about Shakespeare. A rose by any other name is never just as sweet. So me changing the name, you'll weaponize belonging, you'll weaponize whatever I call it. The work remains the same. That is that we have the best talent in our organizations, the best perspectives in our organizations in service of the business. And that's how we should talk about it. I think the companies who have pulled back, I will say that I do think in this space, we need a new playbook. We've been doing the same types of things and programs for years and years and years. And you would think after 30 years, we would be where we're supposed to be. I think this is actually an opportunistic time to really reframe and rechange this conversation about culture, about business, and about talent, because it's all going to be about a talent play. And I hope that practitioners and folks who really understand this will start to reframe it that way. I think after George Floyd was murdered, we start to see DEI's more social impact and social justice, which is a part of that. But it's really, really, for me, about, if I have a very diverse industry and I don't know how to sell to them because I don't understand them, or if they decide they don't want to buy from me because I don't get them, then my business falls. And so that's what I would say about the elephant in the room. I mean, I just think this is an opportunity.
Well stated. And I appreciate that. Well stated in terms of, and the only thing I will add to that, Angela, when you're talking about the folks that are on the list saying we're not doing this work anymore, well, they stopped doing the work 5, 10 years ago. So they've really just shifted what they're doing. And the other thing I would say about DEI, as you know, as a leader, you're assessing it every year. Like any other business function, you're looking at, to take out the overweight stuff, the waste, move out the waste, and enhance what you need to invest in. So well stated. I appreciate that. Jamal, so you came off of mute. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Words matter. Narrative is extremely important. And as you and I talked recently, Pam, I've been exploring, God's vast glossary of synonyms and words, and diversity, equity, and inclusion being attacked. I mean, we can always pivot to other language, but what we're really upholding are really the foundational principles of what diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about. And all we're talking about is equal, opportunity. So we can always find other words, but what I find fascinating is the exploration of antonyms that we need to shine a light on. Like, what does it really mean to be anti-DEI? That means you're pro-homogeneity. Basically, you like sameness, you like uniformity, you like inequity, you like inequality, you like unfairness, you want to perpetuate imbalance in opportunities and treatment and resources. Like, cool, okay. You want to be exclusive, and you like segregation, you like isolationism, and a separationist agenda. And it's not the extent to which we need to shame people, but sometimes we just need to have a practical conversation about what it means to be like anti-DEI or anti-woke, which means you're asleep. And nothing comes to a sleeper but a dream. So that's like one conversation we need to have. But the broader opportunity that I like to shine a light on as well is this selective, like when is DEI appropriate? It's like, oh, consumerism. Like if Hispanic, and Black people are spending, trillions of dollars respectively across our communities, then we'll run ads, marketing campaigns, so on and so forth, because our money is good. 75% of the athletes in the NFL are African American. So I will consume, that product if you perform for me, if you buy from me. But yet, for some, there's an issue when it comes to diversity at the corporate governance level or the C-suite level. So I'm in lockstep with Brother Champ as far as the power of, economics. And we definitely need to be politically incorporated, civically engaged. And also, the fact of the matter is that the Montgomery bus boycott, was to the tune of $30,000 to $40,000 a day for like 13 months, 381 days. So that was like $750,000, but in today's, math, it's about $8 million. So before you know it, like, no, we don't want an exclusive, public bus system. We want it integrated because these folks who protested for a year, we need their money. So there's ways that we can be surgical and strategic. We are too innovative and resilient. I like DEI. I like those words, what they represent. But if we need to strategically pivot, we can do that. But it's about the fundamental principles of what we're trying to be as far as this American idea is concerned. And I'm just tired of folks taking what's ours and conveniently redefining it and telling us, oh, Kamala is or is not Black. Or, this is what DEI means to you. And I'm telling you what it means. It's like somebody telling me what hip hop is. So I'm passionate about it, but I also think that there are very objective, business-oriented ways that we can tackle this, channel the emotion and the energy, but find out, how do you move the power dial in America? And I really align with and tap into what Charles talked about, because that's how we've seen progress in this country for those of us of the diaspora.
That's like DEI in action, right? If you want to see it in action, this is where the power base, it feels it. It makes a difference. I love that. Tyrone, I was thinking about, the talent pipeline and the investment and kind of getting rid of some of the myths that folks are saying universities, oh, they're not doing this. And you only hear major media talk about, what the universities aren't doing. And so in the scope of, where we are today, can you share some about, the work, what you believe, but also some of that work that you're doing to still facilitate and what Berkeley is doing and others following to keep that talent pipeline real?
Yeah, I think the easiest way I could answer that is being intentional. And being intentional means doing the work, actually doing the outreach, actually reaching out to the communities, actually bringing people in to the conversations, being intentional about having representation. Representation matters. Diversity matters. When you have diversity, you have thoughts from people from different experiences that bring a wealth of knowledge to a conversation. This is not education based, but this is a story that I heard from a doctor that she was seeing. She overheard another nurse or another doctor was talking to a white doctor was talking to another white doctor and saying that she was taking her patient and sending her for a psych eval because she keeps hitting her head. And the Black nurse, she heard her and she said, okay. She said, she just keeps hitting her head. Something's wrong with her. I need to put her in for a psych eval. And the lady said, is she a Black woman that keeps doing this? And she said, yeah, how do you know? She said, because she doesn't need a psych eval. She's nothing wrong with her head. She's scratching. That's how and so that's why diversity is important, because you're able to have people that can bring experiences and know culture. When we're in places where culture matters, you can see things, you hear things, you address things differently. With education, it's no different. When you have representation in education, you're able to meet people where they are. You're able to see the impact of motivation, where people can see that it is possible to achieve those levels of excellence. We see athletes and everybody wants to be an athlete because we see all the Black athletes doing these amazing things, but the same thing can be for doctors. Same thing can be for administrators. Same thing can be for any high level of attainment that you can reach. When you see somebody in a position that looks like you, it shows you that it's possible. And I think one of the things that we need to do within our education system is really work with our youth. Only about 38%, I think it is, 35% of our youth out of high school education are actually eligible to apply for a four-year institution because they just don't have the classes that allows them to apply to college. And so we need to work with our youth and make sure that our schools are providing adequate education to allow our youth to actually have a chance to get into college. And when we get into college, mentorship is important.
Tyrone, I think the government took away race as the ability. Can you remember now we finally got to the where you don't have to have the scores. You don't now have to take the ACT, right? The
ACT
SAT,
and
now
SAT,
the
correct,
essay,
yeah.
the essay, right?
Much to what Angela was talking about with her score.
So you guys, I feel a little bit like Roland Martin. No, so I'm saying, so how is that? Let's be real about being Black in America. You just gave a crazy number, but what is that going to do to where universities are afraid, particularly if they're in the state, the UC system, and regulated? What's that impact on the Black students that already have these barriers, and now have universities saying, "Oh, you got to do another way to compete." Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a huge impact because even before we had these whole changes now, African American or Black people in higher education only make up 4% of higher ed. And so that's already, I don't know how much lower we can get from that. But I think it's just being intentional. And I think more importantly, having our students prepared for that next level. HBCUs are great institutions, and I know that's probably next on the attack for education. But there are a lot of institutions that will work with our students, but we need to make sure that our students are prepared. I think that's the bigger conversation, is preparing our scholars to be able to get into those levels of higher education. And finding mentors. Mentorship is important as well. Having mentors, somebody that can help guide you and navigate you through the behemoth that is a higher ed, because the system is a system, and it's a well-oiled machine. And so having somebody that can help navigate them through that situation of higher education is also very important, and pivotal to their success.
Thank you so Maisha, I'm thinking of, how does a professional, these major professional organizations pivot to make a difference? I mean, you guys are there's a couple things, and you guys please chime in on any of these areas, but you have your corporations right now, they're deciding we're taking away targeted, we're taking away goals. So they're now saying aspirational. That's going to be the thing to say. So, so how does the professional organizations, the Black professional organizations, continue to drive force that you need to hire us on one hand? How do you pivot for that? And then what do you do to continue to uplift what Tyrone's talking about, the next pipeline in terms of your responsibility? And then Angela, what are y'all gonna do? You and Jamal, in making sure that you figure out how to be creative to get them hired. And I know Charles will come back and say it's about economics, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Maisha.
So yeah, like the barriers that we're all talking about, like Black professionals, I mentioned, like my experience, we've all faced these, and all this stuff is not new. DEI is not new. I was an EEO officer before DEI came in. Like all these things aren't new. They're just coined differently for people to be acceptive of it and try to find a way to help other people. But one thing people forget is DEI is not about Black people. It's not just Black people. It's everything. And I think people are feeling it now that a lot of things are being taken away from them, and they didn't realize, they just wanted to be ignorant about it, in my opinion. But they just, it was just a thing where it's like, oh, once he said DEI is going away, that means all Black people aren't getting hired. That's not what this was. So, but for us, like as National Black MBA, I said before, we weren't a DEI kind of organization, right? We were here because of the struggles we all went through. Access to leadership roles, how to secure funding for Black businesses, students, higher education, getting the right education to move on to the next space, mentoring, all those things is what National Black MBA Association and other Black associations or Latino associations, like our business professional associations, were made for. And so for us, I think we kind of rolled into this year. A lot of us talked about it, and we were like, okay, well, knowing that we weren't a DEI organization in the first place, for us to pivot, it's actually pivoting right back to where we started, because we kind of got turned into being the DEI organization. We were a talent pipeline for a lot of folks, but they were diversity hire checkboxes versus really qualified Black professionals, right? And so for us, it's been 56 years total. So over 55 years, we've been bridging the gap between talent opportunity, professional development, career development for Black professionals and students. And so we actually rely on all the different corporate partners, all the different government systems to support that. And when they don't support that, then for us in our culture, it kind of like goes back to us trying to figure out, how do we get our people in the door? We can reach back, but outside of that, what else do we need to do to knock on the door and say, we're here, build a table outside the door? Like, what are we doing to do that? So the barriers that we've had that we always faced up against were like lack of access, like I mentioned, right? So for us, we're always underrepresented in the executive and C-suites. We're trying to figure out how to make that move forward. We do have other organizations that do like have a group of Black executives, but that's what we have. Are we seen as powerful? Are we seen as something where that talent pipeline could be picked up and moved with all these other corporations once DEI is gone? We got to figure out how to pivot back into that, and so that they understand the message of who we are. There's a huge underinvestment in Black entrepreneurs. And as an organization who deals with entrepreneurs, similar to Chambers, it's like, what are we doing to support our Black businesses? As Champ said, there's so much that we can do to support our Black businesses, but as consumers, we have to take the power and do it, because we are the largest consumer in this economic state. And so we got to figure that piece out. But just back to your question, it's like, we are National Black MBA and organizations like National Black MBA. We are very critical. We find a way or make one, pretty much. And so leadership development, corporate partnerships, entrepreneurial.
Just ask this to you. Let me just ask you, Maisha, I'm
Yes.
being a little Roland Martin again. So do the Black MBAs call the Urban League? Do you call the National Association of NAACP? Do you call on some of the civil rights organizations? Have you professional organizations been intentional about aligning and having the movement around organizing? Just be real, just let me know, so that the conversation can be collective. I mean, is that a gap? Is that an opportunity?
It's opportunity. And being organizations where all of the ones that you named, right, we're all a national plus all the chapters. We have to figure out as Black people how to collectively come together as the chapters, as the national period, and actually come together and talk about this. I think, was it yesterday or a couple of days ago, you saw Urban League. They are suing the administration, right? They came together with a couple of other folks to sue them about DEI initiatives. And so those are the things that we need to do collectively as organizations, which we can do. But one of the hardest things for us as a community is collaboration. So that we really need to get better at that, because it's our time. It is our time to talk about this. It is our time to make change. And if we're going to do it, we have to do it together.
Appreciate that.
But-
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, in reference to resilience and with corporations, this big elephant in the room, what we're dealing with here, I think that Black Americans, we have to really face this very fact. Martin Luther King said to Harry Belafonte that he believed that he was integrating his people into a burning house.
Mm.
What he meant by that was that America's need and craving for profit over people would eventually send it into chaos and self-destruction.
Mm-hmm.
He saw that by faith, we persevered to overcome. We boycotted, we used violence, we walked by faith. But when he got there, he said, I believe I made a grave mistake. If we refuse to understand the environment in which we live, in which we dwell, that this is about money for them. Slavery was about money. We were chattel. We were property, right? And somehow it has been lost upon many of us that that's how many of them see us. right? So we can get educated, we can be sold the dream, right? But if we don't understand the game that is being played, then what do? We work hard, we get educated, we become a member of the NBA, we write books, we become academians, and we create, right? But there's lack of access to capital, all right? they, they, they're breaking that, what affirmative action is waning. They're taking, like, they use defund the police, right? We knew what that meant, but they won the war of words, Jamal. It was the war of words, right? And for somehow we let them take the words, but we focus on the wrong thing. This is not about DEI. It never has been.
Right.
It's about what I mentioned earlier. Black excellence, Black prosperity is their greatest fear.
Right.
And fortunately, but unfortunately, the nail has penetrated deeper. Now we're willing to listen because we can't afford to, Maisha, as you talked about, have leaders in our community have 1, 2, 5 leaders like we've had in the past. And then they go after that one leader, or one leader take a $200,000 check and abandon the boycott.
Right.
We must move to a movement beyond partisan politics, beyond emotions, and organize in every way. Spending is one of them. When we hold our money back and let God deal with their hearts, what we're going to see is those promises, that those $50 billion that they pledged shortly after George Floyd. We're going to see, when we do the math, when we look at the data, that 65 to 75% of that money was not cash. It was programs like JP Morgan, all of these guys who provided training, which they normally provide anyway, financial literacy, to create a pipeline for our money.
Mhm.
It wasn't cash. Then they did it over a 10-year period of time. But just imagine, example, Coca-Cola. This is where a data-driven friendship model comes into play. It's based upon economic reciprocity and wealth building, not emotions. We're worried about, they're not going to do right. I think they've proven that. Even when we're not fighting, they're trying to kill DEI when the greatest beneficiary has been themselves. They're trying to eliminate the back door that they created for their families.
Right.
They will hurt themselves to get to us, right? This is about money. And Pam, you're right. I have to go back to the money conversation because that is the legacy that my father left me. I saw it. We did 25 million in business. We were one of the largest Black-owned staffing companies in the Southeast back in the 90s. But you know what? We should have been 100, 200 million. But we weren't. I recognized that we did well as a family. My father was in politics. But the average Black family, everybody has to fight tooth and nail. But if we recognize how they look at us, keep the money in your pocket, come together, spend together, be targeted, be surgical, take 1 or 2 companies, show them that we mean business, right? The rest of them will take note. It's about business for them. Corporate America will adjust their attitude when we adjust our spending.
You muted.
There we go.
Jump
I think
in.
you just gave us that one action, Charles, and we're just about to wrap up, and I'm going to ask each of you in your area, in your space, what the call to action is. So when Charles, just real quickly, when you say, okay, let's convene and direct our spending, where can folks go to participate in a process like this right now, in a movement like this right now?
They can go to ourmoneyunited.com and register in the platform as a consumer, as a merchant. If you're head of a group or organization, fraternity, etc., have your members to join and ask them one question. Are you not tired? Period.
Okay,
ourmoneyunited.com.
Thank you for that. Angela? I can't believe the hour's up already. But what is the one action that you would give to folks based on your, corporate experience?
Be intentional. I think that this is going to take intention, even to what you're saying, Charles. Like one of the questions I had was, how do you unite a group of folks that are consumers and not producers? How do you get us to align us to say we're going to go to this company and we're not going to do it? I think the generations are different now. The way people think about consumerism is different now, and you have Black organizations competing with each other versus united.
Let me say
So
this. Yep.
so the one thing I will say two things to people, because it's going to be, we don't know what this 4 years. So as a Black person, protect your peace, because we're going to need it. Be very intentional, and get involved.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And think about those things that, Angela's just said and talking about being intentional and then putting your own stuff aside, to join into something bigger than yourself. Tyrone?
Yeah,
call that?
as you were asking that question, I was thinking, I was like, that's a really good question. I think for me, in regards to education, educate our youth on the power of education. More of our youth want to be famous. They want to be TikTok and Instagram and all these social media platforms. But when you're no longer famous, then you no longer have income. But when you have an education, you can make income. And I think just really giving our youth an opportunity to really learn what it means to be knowledgeable. Knowledge is power. Is because of the access and the ingenuity we're able to create from that information and from that knowledge. So I think just working with our youth to really get them to understand the importance of education, reading, not video games, reading. And really spending time to understand that that's where power is. Because we have a lot of youth that want to be famous in NBA and NFL, but you got to go to school to be able to do that. You can't go to school. You ain't gonna go to the big Power 5 schools with a 1.3 GPA. That's not gonna happen. You need to have your time in education and use that as a backup. And I think that's one of the things we need to work on for our community is really enforce education and time in education. 15, 20 minutes, 30, but something. You spend that on video games.
Yeah, that's true. And Maisha, what call to action do you have from your experience?
Mine is three things: collaboration, community, and investment. And that goes into what Angela was talking about. Like we were producers, then we turned into consumers, and we need to go back to being producers because that's what our background is. That's who we are, right? And so also to what Tyrone said, it's the generation that we're in now. And so we need to figure out how to get this generation to turn back into being the producers of everything that we do. And so for me, it's those three things: collaboration, commitment, and investment. There's organizations. Our organization was here, like I said, we've been here for 56 years. For Black professionals, students, and entrepreneurs. That's a little bit newer, but we're intentional about what we do and who we do it for. And so join your local one. There are 42 chapters across this nation with National Black MBA. Again, I'm Northern California. We have a Southern California. And then there's just a ton on the East Coast. And so if you don't know where to go for National Black MBA, I'll put my information in the chat and Pam can share my information out later. But I mean, that's who we are. This is how I met Pam. And so this is who we are. We are all about education because, as Tyrone said, it takes us further. There's always something that we can always make money if we're educated. And so it is a thing. Pour back into your community. We lost being in touch with serving our community. I grew up in church. My dad was a preacher. I know how to serve my community. Clark Atlanta is all about service. We lost that somewhere. So we need to go back to that. And our organizations, just like fraternities and sororities, we're all here for the service. And so helping each other, being collaborative, being committed to what we do as Black professionals and students, uplifting each other and investing right back into it through membership, through donations, through, if you're a corporate partner, if you are in a corporation and you're ERG, reaching out to the organizations and say, hey, let's figure out how we could get you in with our corporation so we can excel what we do for our Black professionals here. And so that's for me, that's
much for that. Thank you for that witnessing. Appreciate that energy. Absolutely. So Jamal, we didn't even get to talk about Black health. That's a whole nother call. But what is your call to action for folks from your experience?
My call to action is really, as a healthcare executive, is to be a proponent for the business and economic case for health equity. $320 billion annually is the cost of health inequity. That's a real cost. But if we think and project out to by 2040, if we close these gaps and achieve health equity across the United States, we can add $2.8 trillion to the US GDP by 2040. So be a proponent, the positive narrative on not health disparities and the cost per se, but what we can achieve. And the last thing I'll say is, anti-DEI is just a synonym, in my opinion, for anti-Black racism. So what we need to do is use this opportunity to the extent that we've been hit in the mouth, and you got to kind of go back into your corner and retool. So let's have an honest conversation among ourselves from a DEI standpoint as to what has worked and also what has not worked. And we come back out, not just to fight, another day, but to succeed and to sustain what we're ultimately trying to accomplish. And I think companies or individuals who are laying down their DEI arms, they weren't serious about it anyway, so that's fine. Go ahead and go do what you need to do. But those who are staying the course, we can rock out together and have a huge, impact. So those are my parting words.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Tyrone, Angela, Maisha, Charles, Jamal. Your collective insights and expertise, we could have been here for a lot longer. But when you think about, what it is, we heard invest in yourself, education, not just for one, but for all in your communities, intervention, power, collaboration, and economic empowerment. Don't be afraid, take down those shields, your own obstacles, and don't be afraid to collaborate. Don't be afraid to share with each other. I got a question from the group here. So I really want to thank all the audience for joining in, but hold on. Okay. How do we try to close it out? But we got one more question. I'm gonna go ahead and let you guys respond to this. How do we bring reparations to the forefront? I know Charles is going to want to jump in. The one thing I do know in terms of how we do that, it is through political empowerment, is one way we're able to go and have our voice. But Charles and Jamal, I'll let you guys quickly say something about 30 seconds to that. You mute, Charles. Charles, you mute.
Yes. Reparations is going to take political power, legislation, and we can imagine what that fight is going to be like. But the best form of reparations that we can do in the now is to organize our spendings like unions organize their people. And the sooner we do that, the better off we will be. We want results, and we have to be surgical about it. And we just signed up 50,000 people on the platform in 1 week with the targetfast.org boycott with Reverend Jamal Bryant. Young people are listening, but we have to be able to articulate it and communicate and show them results. So if we want reparations, let's go out there and spend money with each other, and we won't have to beg.
Thank you.
No.
Yes, Sam. Go ahead.
And the word reparations is fine. With me, I like to break it down to what it literally means, and I'll give you an example. I have a brother, a close friend of mine that he and I grew up with. He went to Morgan State undergrad, went to medical school in Philadelphia. He's a psychiatrist at the state prison here. And under Biden, he got his medical school debt forgiven. And I just, he told me one day in passing, I'm like, oh, that's great. It matters who's in office. And I happened to ask him, how much was the debt that was forgiven? He said, man, I had about $500,000 worth of medical school debt. And like that, it was forgiven. So that's a few new properties that his family bought and a number of other investments. So when you think about how it can look, how reparations can really look, as far as educational attainment can go, it may not even be called reparations, but it's still achieving what we're trying to accomplish. So I just wanted to use that practical example on the heels of what Charles shared.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. You know, one of the things that I was remiss was to ask questions, you know, from the audience and have those, and they did have a couple questions. One of the other questions that was asked was the inspiration. You guys did share some of the inspirations of historical leaders that, you know, help you go forward, help you push forward in terms of, you know, where you are today, both African-American men and women. One of the inspirational leaders, mine is biblical, that actually I'm studying now that I think about is Ruth. I think about one of the woman, one of the women in the Bible who happens to be one of, you know, God's 5 chosen, you know, women that is, you know, uplifted and followed. She was probably the most sophisticated navigator in terms of power and actually getting the power base to do what she wanted to do for a large group of people. So even though you know, the point to that is there are those working behind the scenes to help elevate and move the agendas forward. That's what we need, a lot more of the collective, you know, empowerment coming in. But some of you that may not have mentioned some of those folks that inspired you, I ask that you share that now. That was one of the questions. Anyone want to share?
I'll go, because I was just gonna say on what we were just talking about reparations, like we said, collectively, that also looks like coming together as a community, buying property, buying businesses, doing all that thing is also a part of that. And I think we need to keep that in mind. Instead of waiting, we can create our own too. And so for me, I would say Madam CJ Walker would be for me because it's just a legacy that reminds me that Black success isn't just about individual achievement, it is collaboration. And so like she couldn't do what she did without having hired Black people, without having bringing that community in to help her build that whole legacy. And so it wasn't just about her, it was about the Black people that were also with her during that journey. So for me, it's Madam CJ Walker.
Excellent. Angela?
You know, I maybe this is just recent. I think Chisholm was really ahead of her time. She was action oriented. She didn't just kind of take what was handed to her. She did something about it. So she's really has been one of my sheroes since I heard about her in the 70s. But I just think the courage and the resilience it took to get herself where she was and to stand up and have her voice matter. There was times where she could have felt invisible and she didn't. So Shirley Chisholm for me is all day one of my heroes.
Thank you. Tyrone, did you mention one of your heroes?
No, I didn't, but I definitely have to share. Chairman Bobby Seale, the Black Panther Party. Oakland native. I think for sure he's a great representation of what community can look like when you bring community together, not just Black communities, but other communities of color, and the impact that you can have creating hospitals and the first breakfast program that now the government has taken on as WIC. And so I think he's a great representation of what leadership can look like and what community can look like when we band together. And actually having the opportunity of meeting him and having a 4-hour conversation with him and picking his brain has been amazing, just to learn the history and just the impact of what we as people can do when we come together as a community.
Thank you for that. And Jamal, I wasn't sure if you got your shero or hero in there.
I would say Du Bois, W.E.B. Du Bois, just a prolific author and civil and human rights leader, but specifically his Souls of Black Folk book and how it celebrates the double consciousness of Black people, our versatility to operate fluidly in 2 worlds, and just celebrating the essence, you know, of just what makes us unique and bilingual, you know, if you will. And Du Bois, you know, his role with the creation of NAACP, Niagara movement, he's just a powerful person.
Thank you. And then Charles.
I would have to say, and we hear this all the time, but definitely Martin Luther King, and that I admire the fact that he led a people without firing a shot, and he did it by faith. Faith comes by hearing. He had a relationship, in my mind, with our Creator who knows all, but he was also able to create the framework and the foundation for us to have this conversation today. And I think we can pay homage to him by looking at what he did during the Poor People's Campaign, when he finally got poor white and Black people allies on the same page and talked about wages and what we're talking about today. There's more of us than them, but he did it in a Christ-like manner, and he elevated health, education in every aspect of society.
And thank you for that. And with that, we're going to say Yusimika, Umeka, and Swahili good night. And thank all of you for joining us, and thank this illustrious panel for being a part of the taste of being Black in America.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe it's still recording.